Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And I have a PowerPoint that I believe will be shown in a moment or two. But as I'm waiting for that, I would like to just give you 1 minute of context, because we've been drawing on the lessons of Europe and other regions of the world. The model that I'm going to draw upon is a combination of Europe and Africa. And it may not be obvious that that's relevant here. So I would like to give you a little bit of the evolution of that. I was teaching here 25 years ago, peace research. In these intervening 25 years, we've evolved from peace research to early conflict, early warning. And from there, I believe we're at a stage that is more emphasizing structural prevention and mitigation on the continent of Africa, at least. And the combination that I wish to talk about is the African Union and the European Union's partnership to address that challenge. And I'll get into the reasons why in a moment. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. I start out with some premises here. I'm not going to read these. I think these have been explicated throughout the morning. They should be pretty obvious, but I'm standing on common ground here. Next slide, please. In short, this is what I'm trying to propose: a way to promote the cooperation that is required, at the same time minimizing the risks of escalation, and there's plenty of disputes to go around. Next slide, please. I take a multi-track approach. It's incremental. And there are 3 initial initiatives. One focuses on the immediate, the real time, the accident inducing incidents and events that could escalate very quickly, especially in the maritime and the border dispute on the peninsula. The second set of activities to be taken simultaneously excuse me, is focused on the more longer term, the structural. It's a much less sensitive area of cooperation, and that gives some breathing room for each of the parties to actually work together without being so sensitive. The third part is, I would suggest, something that we should learn from the existing hazard research centers and the early warning centers for natural disasters. I believe we can learn about the response there, and I'm going to subordinate that one, but I think it is something that we need to engage the existing natural disaster response centers and not leave those off to the side. Next slide, please. And the model actually is not Africa and it's not Europe. It's the partnership that has been forged between the two. The African Union began what they call CEWS, or the Continental Early Warning System, with a brainstorming session in 2003. And in 2007, to jumpstart this, because it was still in the formative stages, they engaged in a partnership with the European Commission, and in particular with the Joint Research Center out of Ispra in Italy, who had developed at that time a monitoring system for news and other sources. This is not just media, but all sorts of sources that are on the web. And this is the model for the real time, and other activities have been developed as well. Next slide, please. But first, the rationale. Why this model? Why does it work? Simply the size, the sheer magnitude of the problem. You're dealing with the continental early warning system in Africa, facing 2 oceans on each side. You're facing a huge continent here, again with an ocean. The diversity of the parties. I'm not saying they're similar, I'm saying they're similarly diverse. You have challenges of colonialism in Africa, you have challenges of historical antagonisms here, and this gives us something that's comparable, and especially with the persistent disputes and the volatility that brings with it. In other words, we have ongoing threats to security. It isn't something that's something you can plan for. It's something that you have to be on guard at all times to stop the escalation. The pragmatic imperatives that I bring to this challenge are urgency, number one. This is not something that we can wait on. It is not something that you can wait for a new administration. It is not something you can plan over the next 5 years. It's something that faces us immediately. And therefore, everything that I would like to suggest can be done literally within months, not years, but literally weeks to months. All of the technology exists, all of the experience exists, and it can be drawn upon as soon as an agreement could be reached to do so. I also stress the minimization of costs. I don't think there's any countries that are flush in cash at this point for this kind of initiative. And this is reusing technology that's already been developed through literally a couple of decades now. It can be off the shelf. It's multilingual. 60-some languages are available. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. These are established technologies that work in both Europe and Africa. And finally, there's a wealth of experience in the deployment and specifically in the partnership. It isn't just what they've done in Europe with the European Media Monitor, isn't just what they've done in Africa with the African Media Monitor. It's the experience of one being the senior partner, helping them. And what is often under-noticed or not noticed is the reciprocalness of this relationship. I happened to be at one of the very first meetings with ISPRA, the JRC group, and the African Union CUES group. And when we sat down, they were demonstrating this system, and they had, at that time, quite a good representation of African news media, roughly 40, give or take some. And the African Union was concerned, well, that's not enough. We need more sources. We have many more sources. And the European contingent said, well, what do you have? And so right on the desk of the person who came from African Union was a folder about an inch thick with 400 sources. And after that meeting, on an informal basis, literally within 10 days, all 400 sources were digested in the European Media Monitor, giving an immediate benefit to both parties. And over the ensuing weeks and months, the formal relationship was established, and it was well on its way because of this immediacy, that there was a reciprocal immediate benefit to be had. And I think this is the kind of pragmatic imperative that we need to build upon. Next slide, please. Now, this is the first of the three components that I'm suggesting, and it deals with the crisis. And it provides, through real-time monitoring, a base of information that is open source, it's transparent to all parties, and it's a common base of information. And you may say, well, all you have to do is read the news. Everybody knows that. Yes, but it isn't an established common base. It isn't done collectively. This would be done collectively. It would be immediately deployable. It would be multilingual. And it's customizable, not just in its filters and alert, but archival searches as well. And in terms of the focus, these can be individually focused on individual countries, on individual actors within those countries, on transnational issues. These things have all been tested in both Europe and Africa, and the expertise is there. Next slide, please. The second of the three components is a more long-term approach. This is the one that's less sensitive, and it's where you have a collective group of researchers, or actually analysts, who are identifying the drivers or the indicators of long-term vulnerability of the individual countries. And this is what makes it less sensitive for the parties to work on, that these are things that are 5 to 10 years down the road, and you can collaborate on these because nobody wants to have their adversary even being vulnerable in that period of time. You want to deal with each other as equals and resolve the issues peacefully. Again, it can be rapidly deployed. It's actively done, and it's scalable. It can be used by individual nations, as it is in Africa. It can be used by sub-regions, like it is with the regional mechanisms in Africa. It can be used by the African Union across the continent. All three of these can operate independently, as they do, but coordinated through some central mechanism. And number 3, please, the next slide. This is where, drawing upon the Asian resource centers that are already in existence, you have these, and I'm not addressing these at this point, other than to say that we need to draw upon this knowledge as well. It exploits the best practices, And to me, this is the most challenging one because it deals with collective response, not just collective monitoring or collective initiatives, but actually doing something in response. But again, it's cost-effective, prudent, and expedient. Okay, next slide. So this is simply a summary, but what I would like to add at the end is a caution that I'm not speaking of modalities. I haven't given you any details on the system. Anybody can log on to the African Union Q's site. Anybody can log on to the European Media Monitor site and find all the details you wish. It is ongoing. It is in production. It is used, and again, it is reciprocal. I'm not talking about the modalities because, as an outsider, I don't believe that's my place. I believe that who should initiate this, who should coordinate it, who should actively staff it, is something to be decided by partners in the region here. But I am suggesting that you engage the parties at the European Union, which are the Commission and the Commission in Africa, to get a head start on this and to use their expertise to start.